Thank you for tuning in and welcome back to the Sandwich of Coherency. So I know that sometimes we dig hard into the politicians and tend to be very critical of their policies and the things that they say. And that's the right thing to do. I don't know if anybody thought I was going to go a different way with that, but no, that's the right thing to do. And there's a lot of people that actually do get unhappy with that. But this is the thing about politics. These are people that want to take on the mantle of leadership, that want to, for whatever reasons they may be, good or bad, want to make changes, whatever those may be, good or bad, and their work has to be held under scrutiny. We've seen what happens around the world throughout history when politicians and leaders are left unchecked, when they're allowed to enact policies and changes for the constituents that they're supposed to serve, and nobody calls them on the bad ones. We've seen that happen. We've seen empires rise and fall because of it. It's the same thing as with dealing with the business. If poor leadership is left unchecked, the business will be driven into the ground. Now, some people say the United States is not a business, and may be right on many aspects of that, but you also have to look at its functions similarly to a business. If the poor leadership of the United States is left unchecked, it will drive the United States into the ground. Poor leadership is what the United States has, and we've seen what it looks like, the consequences of it being left unchecked. There have been attempts to rein it in to some degrees, but they've been futile at best, I guess you could say, because the Democrats keep spending money. They just keep spending and spending money that they don't have in passing a bill onto the taxpayers. They keep enacting policy after policy that is not beneficial to the citizens that they're meant to serve. What I'm going to play now is a clip from the other day. This is around the time when the news came out that the White House administration was providing smartphones to illegal immigrants for the idea of being able to track them. And it's just like, what do you think? They're just going to hold on to the phone? And you don't think that they have the bright idea to, once they get it cash or some way, to ditch that phone? And this is why I said, why would you be opposed to the idea of ankle bracelets on all of them? But they say that's violating their rights in some sorts, but they've entered the country illegally. And since we don't know whom this person is, and, many of them don't have court dates up to 6 years, how do you know whom and what and where the things that this person is? No, you just can't track people. I understand that, but we do track criminals. Dangerous ones, we put ankle monitors on them. And it's just, like I said before, it's not to say that all migrants are dangerous or anything like that. No, nothing like that. But we do need to find a better system, a way of being able to keep track of these people that doesn't include giving them smartphones. And keep in mind that under the Biden administration, 25% of the migrant children that they've brought in, they cannot account for. They don't know where they're at. This is a problem. This is one of those problems that's constantly happening, and it just does not get the coverage that it should. And why? Because it would be bad publicity for the White House administration. Imagine if the American citizens knew that they could not account for 25% of the children that they're bringing in. That's a lot of parents who are going to be very upset. Excuse me. But let's just go ahead and jump right into this, because this is a very interesting thing that we're about to hear about what's going on with the border and Kamala Harris's record on such work. But it also includes some very particular topics of loopholes that the Biden administration is attempting to implement. And it's ironic, but I guess not so coincidental, when you think about the fact that it's a continuation, really, of a policy that was enacted during the Obama administration. So let's just go ahead and jump right into this.
Kamala, who?
Yeah.
In all seriousness, it's unfortunate that Vice President Harris has not fulfilled her mission to be the border czar. It's awful. But did you all see the news today in regards to the free phones that the White House press secretary talked about today? Free phones for migrants. So think about it. I was down in Panama almost a year ago, went to the Darien Gap. Who did I see? IOM, the International Organization for Migration. Where do they get their money? They get a lot of their money from the United Nations. Who puts the most money into the United Nations? Yes, Americans do. Back home on the farm, what we used to refer to this as, my colleague from Texas just said, how many? How many? I would say to you also, how much? We used to refer to it as eating your seed corn. So Americans pay an international organization to send debit cards for these people to make themselves up the Panama pipeline all the way to the southern border. Then you pay for a bus ride to get them to the airport. Then you pay for an airline ride, Philadelphia, Baltimore, wherever. They're going around the country. Then you pay for the education, the free education they're going to get. You pay for the health care. That's what you Americans are paying for every single day for over 2 million people. And it is about to get worse. And to highlight how it's going to get worse and how obtuse this side of the aisle is, we're sitting in judiciary today, creating another loophole in the Virgin Islands. There's another loophole that's being created for visa waiver privileges, something that we saw in these Mariana Islands that was created about a decade ago under the Obama administration, where they allowed parole for people to be able to come in. Chinese nationals, there was like maybe 8 births that were being done on those islands prior to this change that was quietly made in the law. It accelerated to there was like 600 births of Chinese nationals that happened in the Mariana Islands as a result of that loophole. And if you want to see the reporting on it, the Wall Street Journal did an excellent job. And it was our one of our intelligence agencies in 2017 that really dug into this. And yes, here's this huge loophole, and they want to now create it in the Virgin Islands. That's what we're voting on right tonight in the Judiciary Committee. They want to create another loophole, and they're like, oh, it'll only be a few people. You, the American people, do you believe that?
I appreciate my fellow border stater being down here. You hold those Mounties back up there, okay? You just keep them at bay.
Every state is a border state, including my state of Wisconsin.
Tom,
Amen.
can I add something to that, what you just said? It's not just the phones. What about the gas cards that's in this latest, the budget that the president had? What about that? And just to put some context to this, Texas, I think, I think you got about 15 to 20 million people. South Carolina has 5.3. That's the number that's going to be coming into this country in the next 4 months if the pace continues. It's a travesty. It's something that Americans, we have got to be aware of and stop.
And he's not wrong about that. I mean, and but I hope that those numbers are way off. I just 12 million, 5 million, 17 million people coming in over the next 4 months. I really hope that that's an exaggeration. I mean, granted, over the course of what's been happening with Ukraine, Over 4 million people have fled the Ukraine. They'll be making their way to the United States. Some will. They've already said they're bringing at least 100,000 of them here. But they're being dispersed throughout all of Europe. But it's interesting, I just, like I said, I hope that that's an exaggeration on those numbers. I mean, I know that we're looking at a possibility of at least 500,000 a month, but I don't know about 17 million. I'm not gonna dive into that one head first. But yes, again, we're talking about these policies, and just as they mentioned with the IOM, the thing is that, yes, the migrants that are fleeing, or rather migrating from their countries to come to the United States illegally, are getting funding from somewhere. So you find out that it's the IOM, and you find out the United States is funding all this. So it's a crazy thing, because the thing is like we mentioned before, the United States gives millions, billions in itself of dollars to these countries as a whole, spread out to help improve those nations so that they can become more economically independent, and better able to provide for their citizens, so that they don't feel the need to have to migrate from their countries to survive. And this was, one of the main questions during the Trump administration. Why are we sending them all this money if their citizens are still coming here, and we're going to have to spend that much money that we've already sent to provide and pay for the ones that are migrating here illegally? It's just, but it's a problem, because if you don't help fund those countries in themselves, whatever problems they're facing as it is will get even worse. So the money just keeps pouring out. But even now, Green said, we need to do something about this. We need to do something about what's happening to cause these migrations. Excuse me. So that's a big thing that we need to really be thinking about, that the White House administration just keeps blowing right over. The Democrats, and this is the thing, is the Democrats can have the control. They have the vice president as a tie-breaking vote. And it just keeps getting worse. These are their policies. This is not like Republicans are doing these things. They're in the minority. The Democrats have the majority. And this is a clear result of their policies. You can't blame the other side. No, these are all their policies. And this idea of gas cards in there. Yes, think about that. They've destroyed the American energy independence it had. They're having increases of fuel prices, just astronomical. Now, they could fix this by increasing U.S. drilling. But since they put a halt to that, basically, their response is, well, you're already paying so much at the pump. We'll just take even more of your money and give you gas cards. These gas cards that they want to give people is not just some magic money out of the air. The citizens will end up having to pay for it on the back end. So they're just, taking from you later on down the road right now. But I want to jump into another important portion, because this is really important, because it's really gives a clear understanding of how the Democrats view certain things. And one of those main things is being what happened in Afghanistan. Let's be honest, it was a debacle. Everyone around the world admits that what the United States did on its evacuation was a tragedy. It was a tragedy. It's a tragedy. The world watched that happen and were absolutely shocked. They were in awe at how the U.S. handled that. What I want to play next is a clip from, so it's back and forth. I'm just going to play a little bit of it between Brian Schatz from Hawaii and Josh Hawley from Wisconsin. Or is it Missouri? I always get that mixed up. But, yes, we will be playing Brian Schatz and Josh Hawley. But, Brian Schatz is a Democrat from Hawaii, but he gives a really clear view of how the Democrats view the lives lost and the unspoken, well, they don't speak of it at all, consequences of their actions in Afghanistan. Just because you're not hearing about it in the news, make no mistake, it's not all peaches and cream fun and games in Afghanistan right now. People are, yes, still selling their organs to try and eat. People are selling their children to try and get food to feed their other children. Art is illegal for girls. It gets even worse. Women, the female judges and women who were able to get into politics have had to flee the country because the Taliban has been looking for them in order to execute them as examples to the other women in the country if they decide that they ever want to attempt to stand up for themselves. Those are real problems happening, not these surface topical problems that people claim to be having in the United States. We've talked about that before, but again, the way the left feels about it is clearly obvious in his statements. So let's just go ahead and jump right into that.
We in the United States and our armed forces take logistics extraordinarily seriously. But we don't have the person in charge of that confirmed to lead the department on logistics. This position is left unfilled because Josh Hawley is blocking Mr. Lohman's nomination. Now, Senator Hawley apparently disagrees with the Biden administration's policy on Afghanistan, and so he's punishing our service members and our NATO allies while a war in Europe is raging. It's worth repeating. Senator Hawley is mad about what happened 6 months ago in a different part of the world, and in response, he's harming the Department of Defense and our national security. It is completely ridiculous. I will not yield.
It's worth repeating that is just completely there was a complete lack of compassion in that statement. Josh Hawley is holding up because there's something that happened in Afghanistan. It happened 6 months ago in another part of the world. Bro, this is really, really an important situation. The situation that happened in that other part of the world has long-lasting national security risk to the United States because of the way they evacuated. Because of the way they evacuated, all that biometric data that was left, which included the people that helped the United States throughout the years, was left behind. All of it was left. So there's a safety issue for those people and their families that were left behind. Today, it's just something that happened 6 months ago in another part of the world. Jeez, man, how dare you want accountability for that? But the reason they hold up nominations, and this is one of the things that people, typically aren't too clear on, sometimes they hold up nominations to be able to get clarity and to get accountability for other things. shouldn't have to hold up a nomination in order to get accountability on what happened in Afghanistan, but that's the way the cookie has crumbled. So let's go ahead and have a quick listen to Josh Hawley's response.
The senator from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for finally giving me an option to speak. It's interesting the senator will come to the floor, but he doesn't want to engage in a colloquy. He doesn't want to answer questions. But let's talk a little bit about the policy, the disastrous foreign policy that he is supporting. This is the White House's latest talking points, that their failure in Ukraine is now due to some logistics problem in the Department of Defense, that of course they can't be responsible for what they're doing. Just like they're not responsible for anything. They're not responsible for what happened in Afghanistan, their policy. They're not responsible for what's happened in Ukraine, their policy. Let's talk about their policy in Ukraine that the senator seems to favor but doesn't want to answer questions
Mr.
about.
President, will the senator yield to a question?
So what has President Zelensky been asking for weeks, indeed months on end? He said, send us planes. What has this administration done? No. Actually, first they said yes, then they said maybe, then they said no. Today, the Secretary of Defense testified before the Armed Services Committee under oath that even though this Congress has appropriated $3 billion in military lethal aid to the people of Ukraine, the Defense Department has so far given them less than a third of it. Why? Because of logistics? No, he was asked that. No, because of policy. His comment was, we are giving them what we think they need. Mr. President, I would just point out that that's not what the Ukrainians think. If you listen to President Zelensky, if you listen to the Ukrainian parliamentarians who have been here, if you talk to them, what they'll say is they need more military aid. They need more help. This administration won't give it to them. Not because of logistics, but because of policy. We don't have a logistics problem. We have a Joe Biden problem.
Yes, we do have a Joe Biden problem. And it's not logistics. I mean, they keep throwing it around like it's not really an issue. This administration has withheld, excuse me, pardon me. It's withheld the funding. I mean, think about this. They are allocating $3 billion. They've only sent about a third. But somehow they're already allocating another 0.3 billion. So now the question comes in, what will happen with that money if they haven't already sent out the money they've already allocated? It's just getting absolutely ridiculous. The White House is absolutely falling apart. The second part is going to be a short part, but it's lays into the fact of the things that we've been talking about, the things that the American people are actually concerned about, not the fluff pieces and the Twitter ramblings of absolute nonsense that they think people want to know about.
This administration's policy was to deter a Russian invasion of Ukraine. It failed. Why did it fail? It's not hard to see. President Biden came to office. What did he do? When Ukraine asked for military assistance,
Will the senator
he
yield?
denied it. But can we have order, Mr. President?
I'm just asking, will the senator yield?
Can we
You
have
say
order,
no.
Mr. President?
Senator from Missouri has the floor.
When Joe Biden came to office, the people of Ukraine asked for military assistance a year ago. A year ago. Did he give it to them? No. He denied them military assistance. He denied them lethal aid. What did he do, though, for Vladimir Putin? When he came to office, he green-lighted Vladimir Putin's pipeline. He turned their pipelines on. He turned our pipelines off. What did he do with American energy production? He throttled it down. He turned it off. His first actions in office were to, among other things, cancel the Keystone Pipeline, halt the leasing program in Anwar, issue a halt to new oil and gas leases and drilling permits on federal lands, impose tougher regulations on oil and gas and methane emissions, and a host of new regulations on other energy production. And that had the desired effect. Russian energy production up, Russian revenues up. What's happened since then, since the invasion of Ukraine? Well, it's been one gaffe after another. He won't send them planes. Today, the Secretary of Defense also confirmed that this administration has, in fact, not been sharing intelligence with the Ukrainians. In fact, today the Secretary of Defense had to admit that the administration was going to be forced to change policy, his words, change policy in Ukraine, because, in fact, we had not been sharing all the intelligence we might have with the Ukrainian soldiers and the Ukrainian military, despite their request from it. Whose decision was that? Joe Biden's. It's his policy. The president, though, hasn't been entirely silent. He did have this to say: for God's sake, this man cannot remain in power. So now Joe Biden doesn't appear to know whether we're fighting to or struggling to help the Ukrainians defend themselves, or whether we're launching a war of regime change in Russia itself.
I mean, I swear it's almost if it's intentional. And when you think, when you over these episodes we've done, when you listen to the timelines, when you listen to the information, it just seems like it was all just like it's. I don't want to say it is, but it's hard to look at it and not say that this almost seems intentional. Like the lack of compassion and the lack of doing anything seems almost intentional. Now, don't get me wrong. If you've listened to these episodes to the show, you know that I do believe in assisting the Ukraine. I do believe in giving them aid. I just don't believe that the United States should be the ones leading the charge on that. I think that should be done by the European nations. Now, like I said, that doesn't mean that I don't think the U.S. should assist. But the thing is that I have a huge problem on the other side of the simple fact that right now the government, the left and the right together, are pushing for more funding to send to the Ukraine, yet they're not even using the funding that they've already allocated. And that's what I have an issue with that. You know, I have a feeling that a lot of this money that they're allocating is not going to make its way there. It's going to make its way to somewhere else that's somehow 6 degrees separated from whatever connected to the Ukraine. They've sent a third of the $3 billion to Ukraine. I believe that the other $2 billion has been spent and sent somewhere else. But again, that's just my speculation on that. I mean, but we've seen time and time and time again, money gets allocated. It doesn't make it where it's supposed to go, but somehow it ends up getting spent. So I wouldn't be surprised by that fact. But I guess we'll wait and see what happens, and we'll see how this will affect things going forward. The Democrats should be really worried because with the upcoming elections, at this rate, they look to lose most of their seats. Now, I don't believe that we need a supermajority, just a huge number of Republicans. I think we need balance. But we'll see what happens in November. But I thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.